Hello, welcome to our Friday live session. This session is supposed to be so that we can discuss a little bit more about the recommendations that we post on Thursdays and Fridays. We have a theme to them, and this week the theme has been a very broad one about on being alive. Um, it's hard to describe this, but I would say that I chose this theme um, and these recommendations. These are some things that when I read them, when I watch them, my heart soars, and I have the sense of like all these opportunities opening up before me. So I would like to start now. The first recommendation that we had yesterday was a poem. It has a very long title, but it's basically a woman who thinks she's going to go through heartbreak very soon. So she sinks down to see Titanic and asks her advice to how to embrace that heartbreak. But instead, what the Titanic tells her is to embrace being living. A very beautiful line is that you're not a boat, you can sink and come back again. And it's just a really beautiful poem, and the imagery is so beautiful, and there are some really nice lines in it. The other recommendation that went out today was a commencement address which was written by a columnist for the class of 97. um, it's sort of one of those advice to your younger selves, and every time I read it I wonder what I would tell my younger self. And just reading all of those things again makes me realize that there's more to it than what we're going through right now. When you're so caught up, you can get caught up living, um, and forget about the bigger picture. You can, for example, one thing that she says is that you're not never as fat as you think you are. And just like that thing, especially I don't know, I know body image issues are sadly quite common. So just how much they affect us and just how much they hold us back from living our lives much more fully. So they're beautiful things, and I like going back to them whenever I can. So to talk about the theme and what these things remind me is a phrase that I heard someone use before. It's called front of the mind thinking. And I think what she meant by that was that in our immediate concerns, in our day-to-day lives, we get so caught up with what's going on right now. If for example you're a student, you may be thinking, oh, is my assignment due, or am I doing good in school, or anything like that. And on a job you can be like, okay, is that project due, am I doing good enough according to my colleagues, things like that. And those are things that are just immediate and things that you're faced with, and day in and day out, those are the things that you're thinking about, interacting with. But there's also back of the mind, larger picture and things that you may not have a stimulus to think about every day. For example, I recently had this experience where I was talking about a book, and that led to an entirely different conversation about theories, ideas, and all those abstract things that we don't usually think about every day. And that made me realize how I hadn't done that from maybe since I was last in college, and how refreshing that felt. Um, and that also makes me think about how our awareness works. There is so much that we hold in each of our brains and each of our minds. um, we've had thoughts about galaxy, we've had thoughts about what it means to be human, we've had thoughts about whether this is the only world or whether there are other dimensions and are we in a simulation, things like that. But we don't generally think about them, right? But they're still inside our brains. So this idea that you have a lot of things, but what are you directing your consciousness towards? So there is this interesting experiment and exercise that meditation technique that's used quite often. So maybe if you want to try it, it might not work. You can try it on your own time someday. But what it requires us to do is sit down, close your eyes, calm yourself down, and then bring your consciousness to the point where your body meets the surface that you're sitting on. It could be your feet on the floor, or your body sitting on a chair, things like that. And bring your consciousness to that point of contact. And every time I've done that, I've been blown away by how effective it is. I can actually feel my skin making contact with the bed sheet, or my feet making contact with the floor, and whether the texture of the floor, the temperature of the floor. But these are not the things that we're thinking about constantly, right? And this leads me to think, like, what I understand from this is that is maybe how our brains work. There's so much stimulus around us that it's possibly not possible to be processing all that stimulus at the same time, and making sense of it all. So for example, when you look at a tree, your brain tells you it's a tree, and even though you can also see the leaves on the tree, you can see the branches, you can see the trunk, you can see the roots, you can see the fruits on the tree, you can see the organisms on the tree, the birds, the insects, and everything. But the first thing that your brain tells you will be the short story of it, that it's a tree. So I really like that. From this, like, the conclusion that I draw is that we choose what things to give our attention to, and those are the things that come to the front of our mind. We have to actively choose to pay attention to things that we think are important. And I think in all of this, what is also important is to remind ourselves day in and day out, remind ourselves constantly to actually pay attention to the things that we think are important, to pay attention to things that matter to us. And that is why I really like these recommendations, because they remind me of what it means to be alive. I feel like if you think about it, it's a miracle being alive. And there are endless opportunities for us just by virtue of being alive. Just because we're alive, there are 10,000 things we could do, and 10,000 dreams we could dream and achieve and try to work towards, and so much more. A lot like what Titanic says in the poem is that you don't have to prepare for heartbreak, you don't have to prepare to sink down. There are so many things to do, and a very beautiful line in the poem is, you have enough ballrooms in you to dance with everyone you've ever loved. And that was where I was coming from this week in recommending these things. And I really hope you take a look at them, and if you have already, I would really like to hear from you about what you thought about them, what they made you think about, and how often do you wonder about what it means to be alive. If there are any questions, you can send them in now. Or even any thoughts that you might want, something that the recommendations reminded you of. Thank you. It's so nice to see you here as well, Kushali. Okay, so I have a question for those watching. Could you tell me something that makes you feel alive? Something that reminds you of how amazing it is just to be able to breathe and exist and be alive. Kushali says positive at positive underscore infinity underscore says, I think the recommendation a couple of weeks ago on money slash the economic system was an eye opener for me and is pushing me to educate myself more about the alternative economic systems. Yes, I do agree. Even for me, I found that fascinating. And again, it's one of those things where you really have to question things, because if you're just operating on a level where you look at what's happening, accept it, and try to make the best of it, these are the sort of things that wouldn't have come to my mind, and it's so interesting to engage with ideas like these and even see what they can mean in our own lives. So, for those who've just joined, um, I'm curious to know, because this week's theme has been on being alive. I'm curious to know, what is that one thing or one experience that has made you feel infinite, or to quote from Perks of Being a Wallflower, but to made you feel alive. Okay, Chiggy Wiggy Vignesh says, I think it's the vastness of the sky every time I look outside. Gives me a reason to ponder about upon my existence, but also gives me a reason to horizon and beyond. Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think even anything that's related to nature does that. Like, for example, looking at ripples in the water, I feel like I can watch that endlessly. And even as I'm looking outside, I can look inside, reflect the same way as you mentioned, ponder upon my existence. Yeah. Khashali says, staying connected with nature, even if it's in small ways, like seeing the sky, makes me feel alive. Yeah, I can really strongly relate to this, because like sometimes I forget that I have not been outside, especially like in a time like this. So I haven't even gone outside to my balcony to look at the sky. And when I do that, there's like this shifting of gears in my mind, which I really enjoy. Yes, perks of being a wallflower is amazing. Would anyone else like to share what they find helps them feel alive? Hello. Vignesh says that's why a trip to the mountains is so wholesome. Yes, I think especially for like city bred, city dwelling people, those avenues to connect with nature are so rare to come by. Yeah. Anisha, hi. What makes you feel alive? And also, interestingly, what do you think is the role of art in all this? Natural nature, as we've discussed, is a sort of like a very organic way for us to connect in a deeper sense to things outside of us, our environment, and also to ourselves. But I think even art helps us achieve that to an extent. So the question is, what makes you feel alive? What experience has made you feel alive? Um, Ice Brew says the hope that survival is extremely important than living our norms lives. I don't quite follow that. Would you like to elaborate on that at iced underscore brew? For those who've just joined, um, we're talking about the theme today for our recommendations, which was on being alive. There are two recommendations that you can check out on our profile today. Um, and we hope you enjoy them. You can also watch this live chat again. It'll stay up for about 24 hours on our IGTV. So if you've missed any of it, you can always go back and watch it again. Kushali says, at times, what art brings to my attention and the capacity of what it can make me feel seems overwhelming. Right from songs, novels, poems, drawing, comedy, everything. Yes, again, I feel very strongly to that because I feel like art is anything that makes me feel something, and it's just how much of it it's able to get through. Like, so much can be going on, but then you read something or watch something or see a piece of art, and it just takes you in another place and connects you to another part of yourself or part of this world. Okay, ice underscore brew says, in the sense these days survival is the key to keep ourselves mentally calm. True. I think, yes, that even as we talk about looking at the bigger picture, it's also sometimes bringing it down to the smaller things, and focusing on those smaller things, uh, especially in times like these, that really helps. I can, she says, reading and doing artwork really helps in cooperating with such inevitable lives. Definitely. I agree very strongly with that. I'll have instances where I'll just look at sunlight coming into the room, and not even like direct sunlight, but just like daytime light in a dark room. I feel like that is that calms me down so much and brings me to the moment, and I enjoy reading and doing artwork too. Alright, guys, I think we can wrap this up here. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a weekly feature. Every Thursday, we give out a recommendation to watch something, a good watch, and every Friday, we give out a recommendation to read something, a good read. And on Friday evenings, we invite everyone to have a live chat with us, so that we can engage in a deeper way with our recommendations and what we're reading and what we're watching and what we're thinking. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for your thoughts. And anyone who's just joined or who missed any part of it, you can watch this video for the next 24 hours. It will be in our IGTV. So yes, thank you. I hope we take away a reminder to look at the miracle of being alive and keep that alive within us. Do let us know how that goes for you. Okay, bye.